Hey, beautiful people. It's Wednesday, January 15th, 2014. We got a special guest tonight, thanks to Waterboxer. Mark Tullius is actually with us tonight, so we're ready to drop this for your enjoyment. This is the fifth episode of Don't
The
Fake.
funk. Let's do this. Our special guest, Mark Tullius, who recently was a guest on Eddie Bravo Radio. Great fucking episode with our buddy Waterboxer. So, Mark, what's going on?
Not too much. First off, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I just thought it was kind of cool. I was talking with my brother earlier. He did a lot of research into our family, and we originally originated from Germany, near the border of France. And I think our relatives came over like in 1835. So it's been a while, but one of these days I definitely have to get back there.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, but no, I've what I wanted to talk with Eddie a little bit more was the MMA project I'm working on. I started it maybe I think it's almost been 2 years. At first I wasn't sure whether or not I was even going to do it. Um, but when I was fighting, everyone would always ask me like, why are you fighting? Whether it was my parents that hated it, my friends that just didn't understand. People would always ask me like, why are you fighting? You went to a good college. I was never getting into fights. That was a question I could never understand. I could never answer it myself. So that's why I began this little journey of traveling around the country, training with fighters, interviewing them afterwards. And it's been pretty incredible.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your fighting record. You started MMA fighting in 1988, right?
98, yeah, 1998.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think yeah, that record sucks. And that was another thing, it's like I wasn't a good fighter. I was good in the gym. I was training with Frank Mir at the Las Vegas Combat Club. I would always be pretty good in the gym, but then when it came to the cage, I just didn't have the confidence, and I was also very, very stupid. Back then I would take fights on. One of the fights, I took it on 2 hours notice. When I fought Bobby Hoffman, he was a beast at the
Your
time. I
second
fought him.
fight.
Yes, he was.
That's your second
Uh,
fight, right? Bobby Hoffman.
yeah,
That's a
yeah. I had
legit
some other
guy.
small ones. Yeah, at the time, his only loss was I think he got disqualified for spitting on a referee, and I took that on 5 days' notice, just out of shape. Just I didn't care, and the fight was going pretty well for the first maybe 10 minutes, and but it was a 15-minute round, no breaks,
Wow.
and then he mounted me. I tried pulling guard on him. He mounted me, and then I think I took I don't know how many punches to the face. Dude, he was just hammer fisting my face, and I was actually thinking. I still remember that thought too. I was like, I could keep taking these punches. Like they weren't hurting that bad. I felt my nose break, but I was like, it just would have been ridiculous. But I do remember getting home from that. I took the flight home. Everyone on the plane is looking at me like, what the hell happened to this guy? I get home, I see my mom. She starts to cry.
Oh,
I mean,
fuck.
it didn't hurt, and that's the thing with fighting is like, this stuff doesn't really hurt. It's just scrapes and bruises and a couple broken bones. But it was fun. I had a great time doing it. Back then I wished I was more successful, but now, I realize I think the reason I was fighting was, so I could do this. I could bring MMA to a larger audience. I could help explain it. I could, talk about the fighters and show what kind of incredible people they are. Um, but that record though, that almost stopped me from doing the project because even though I had it in my head that I wanted to do this thing, I wanted to write this study. I almost didn't do it because of this self doubt. I was like, oh well, I was a shitty fighter, so who am I to write this book?
Uh,
Um, and so that was in my head. But luckily, on my first trip, everyone was just so super supportive, and I met Kirik from mixedmartialarts.com, and I actually stayed at his house for a couple days, and he told me, I told him who I had fought, Bobby Hoffman and Tim Lasik and those guys, and just talked a little bit about where I was coming from. He's like, man, he's like, you know what? He's like, you're the perfect person to write this book. And I did his interview, and he definitely, he definitely boosted my confidence, and I definitely owe him some thanks for that.
Yeah, but your record, you might have lost a couple times, but I mean, there's no shaming losing really, because you went in there, you tried what you want to do. So you went in there and fought, and back in the day, man, 98, that's some old school mixed martial arts. I mean,
Yeah,
the same rules.
yeah,
It wasn't even the same rules as nowadays, right? Like,
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
not at
the
all.
rule set back then.
Yeah, the rules have changed a little bit. In fact, one of the fights, it was an extreme challenge fight. I fought this guy Larry Parker, and I had side mount, and we were able to knee to the side of the head,
Wow.
and they ended up stopping the fight because his ear was halfway torn off because because I was kneeing him in the head, and it wasn't intentional, but those were the rules. So yeah, definitely a little crazy. I did a fight in Mexico that's not even on the record. And one of my buddies got bitten in that fight. The guy spit out his mouthpiece and bit him on the stomach when he was getting choked.
Jesus.
Yeah, things were a little bit crazy, but and that's one reason why I don't limit my interviews to just the top level guys. I had advice early on from an author saying, "Hey man," he's like, "Don't waste your time doing all this." He's like, "Go interview the top 12 guys, and you'll have a best-selling book." And I told him, I was like, I don't give a shit about a best-selling book. I was like, that's not what I want to write. Like, that'll be awesome if this becomes best-selling. But I was like, I want to understand who fighters are. And in order for me to understand who fighters are, I need to talk to some of the big name guys, but I need to talk to every fighter, whether they're pro. The majority of the guys have been pro, but I also talk to amateur guys. I talk to guys with losing records, winning records. It's like, okay, because why is that guy with that losing record? He's not making any money. Maybe he's amateur and he's, 1-5. Why the hell is that dude fighting? Why is the guy, that everyone has their own reasons. And so if I only went to certain schools, if I only went to certain parts of the states, I wouldn't get to see the entire picture. And it's still limited because I'm keeping this to the U.S. I did go up to Canada and interviewed a couple guys there, but for the most part, I've kept it to the U.S. But compared to other sociological studies, like this is the largest. Recently, I just went to Brown University, where I graduated from, and there's a professor there who teaches the sociology of martial arts, which is fascinating. I had a chance to sit in on one of his classes, and we'd been emailing back and forth for a while, and we got to sit down and we talked about it, and we looked at some of the stuff that's been done as far as studies. And these studies are, it's guys looking at maybe like 5 to 25 fighters, and they're usually from the same gym or at least the same area. And I was like, that doesn't really tell you much. That's just like such a small thing. We're at I think I just hit 350 interviews so far, and that doesn't even count all the guys that I talk to, when I'm at the gyms, because lots of guys. I try to talk to everyone I roll with, and whether they're just doing jits or they're kickboxing or whatever. I try to find out like why they fight or why they don't fight, and that's kind of my focus right now, because I kind of feel like I've talked with enough fighters that I've seen the different types. I've seen the wrestlers, I've seen the new breed, I've seen the guys that have just grown up watching on TV. I've talked with the old guys, I've talked with the guys that were bullied, talked with guys that had been in a lot of trouble growing up. But now I'm trying to focus a little bit more on seeing the difference between fighters and guys that strictly do jiu-jitsu, and especially those guys that compete. It's like, okay, why don't the guys that do jiu-jitsu and compete but don't fight, why don't they fight? What's the difference there? So that way, we have a pretty close group, so we can see those kinds of differences.
Yeah, that's what, for example, the UFC fighter Uriah Hall, you know him? He was in the final of the Ultimate Fighter, but he lost against Kelvin Gastelum. But he was very impressive during the TV show Ultimate Fighter. He got knockouts and spinning back kick knockout. But then he kind of had this problem that he said himself, he doesn't have the killer instinct, Like
right.
Sometimes he holds back and doesn't really want to hurt his opponent. So
Yeah, and that's like I have a lot of respect for that. I mean, I've always had a hard time watching guys like throw those extra punches when the fight's over.
Oh yeah.
But I understand it. But with Uriah, I remember I watched the fight against John Howard, who I interviewed. I haven't interviewed Uriah, but I did interview John Howard. So I was like, I was rooting for Howard. But in that fight, they both had just so much respect for each other, and I don't remember how many times they touched gloves.
Yeah.
After punches, I was like, and it kind of got ridiculous. So I was glad to see, his next fight, the last fight that he had against it was Lieben,
Yeah.
correct?
Chris Lieben.
And he didn't get touched, I don't think, and he devastated him. But so it'll be interesting to see whether or not can that killer instinct be developed, or is he just too nice of a guy? Is he going to be limited? I think he'll be. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to. He probably will be a good fighter. I think it's just a matter of getting over whatever psychological issues or whatever.
So right now you're 350 interviews in. You've trained in 100 gyms. Do you have like a certain time frame that you're writing this book over, or like a certain amount of gyms you want to go to, or a certain amount of people you want to interview, or something?
Well, when I first started, I had no idea what I was going to do. I really I was like, man, no one's even going to want to talk to me. No one knows who I am. But then I set my goal at 100 fighters, and I told the professor at Brown, a different professor, I told him what my plan was, and he kind of rolled his eyes at me. He's like, oh, really? And so when he did that, I was like, that kind of motivated me. I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm going to go. Originally, I wanted to go to every state. I thought that would have been awesome, but then I had a little baby, and my wife wasn't digging that because I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I also have a 5-year-old daughter, and so the trips went from the very first trip I think was 3 weeks long, and then every trip started getting a little bit shorter. This last one I did 9 states in 9 days, where I was just hauling ass, and I wasn't sure when I was going to cut it off, but on this last trip, I realized it was after my visit to 10th Planet in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I called my wife right after that last interview, and I told her, I was like, I'm ready to write this book now, because I realized kind of why I was fighting, and I had heard so many. I really did a lot of growing on that trip, I think, because I'd been fighting with the urge to spar. Because I'm 41 years old. When people see me, lots of people see me, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're in shape. You're a big dude." It's like I'm a pretty good sized guy. Like I'm 6'2", 250, but I'm out of shape. Like even though I go and I try to train with these guys, I'm nowhere where I should be. And my buddy, who's a photographer, I had just finished Eddie's class. I did 2 hours on Eddie's class. And then it was time for the fight team to start training, and they asked me to jump in with them. And like an idiot, I do, and I think I did maybe like 4 rounds with the guys, and I felt fine. But afterwards, my buddy's like, man, he's like, you probably shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be taking those hits to the head. And so that kind of forced me to take a look at why I was even sparring. Sparring doesn't do me any good. And not only sparring, but the sparring made me want to fight again. I was seriously thinking, I was like, well, maybe I'll release the book and I'll have a big, I'll fight on a card when I release the book, and I'll get a lot of the fighters that I've interviewed to fight on the same card, and we'll make it a big thing. And for me to take a fight is just pretty like that's pretty fucking ridiculous. I would have nothing to gain by it, and except for I think it would be fun. But you could, there's definitely a lot to lose, whether it's an injury or whatever. I'm a writer, so I was like, I need to keep my brain intact. So that's why I decided to kind of now that we've hit 350, I think we're probably going to end it up at like 400 fighters or whatever. I want to hit some of the big name guys now, just to kind of wrap things up. I want to finish up at Jackson's. Hopefully, speak with John Jones. I was at Jackson's a couple months ago, and it was awesome. Really hit it off with Winklejohn. Him and his wife are just incredible people, and Mike hooked me up with several of the fighters. I think I did maybe like 12 to 16 fighters in a couple days over there. And so I definitely want to end up over there. So right now I'm just kind of focusing on 10th Planets, interviewing friends of mine that used to fight, and then working on the big name guys. Like I want to take another trip up north again, hit AKA again. I had the chance to roll with Velasquez and Cormier and those guys, but I didn't have a chance to interview them. I interviewed a lot of the other guys from the team, but now it's time to go back and get some of the bigger name fighters.
Wow.
That sounds
And
awesome.
the first time I heard about you was on at a thread at mixedmartialarts.com, and there were photos of you with Matt Horwich on top of you with boxing gloves, and you were going at it.
Yeah, yeah, that's when I realized that one. Carrick shared that. That was me getting my ass kicked at Kings. You know, that was me trying to start to get back in shape and feeling like, okay, maybe I could jump into the pro practices. And so that's what I was like, okay, I was like, I'm going to start training. And then, of course, I don't really start training, not like I need to, not in order to do these practices. And then it was a little bit later, you know, I'm back at Kings, because for a while that's what I was calling kind of my home gym or whatever. I was trying to get in there every so often and do workouts with them, you know, great guys. And so we start practice, and Master Hafiel shows up, and he doesn't know me, so he just is looking at me like, you know, big white guy or whatever. And I'm teamed up with Horwich, and we're doing all these we're doing kicks, tons and tons of kicks, to where the end of practice, you know, I can barely move, and I think I'm looking okay. You know, it's like Matt's making me look pretty good. And so as soon as that's done, Master says to put on our gear, and then he teams me up with Fabricio.
Oh shit.
And yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. But I was like, well, maybe it's, you know, light sparring. I'm not expecting much. I was like, I'm not a fighter, but it doesn't occur to me that these guys don't know that. Like Fabricio doesn't know that. Master doesn't know that. And so he just starts kind of putting it on me, and my buddy was like, holy shit. And I probably took about, you know, 6 knees just in that one round with Fabricio. Just, you know, I got dinged a couple times, and then every time he hurt me, he would back right off. Like, he was super cool and everything. And then after that, I survived that round. Then I went with a couple other guys. I did one light round with Matt, and then with Jessica Martinez, really cool female from there. And then for the last round, then they put me in the cage with Babalu, and that was not fun either, man. It was like the same thing happened where he just beating the shit out of me.
Yeah, Babalu was known for being a little bit of a tougher, brutal guy.
Yeah.
You remember when he got cut when the UFC cut him because he held on to the choke too long. That's a little bit what he's known for, kind of like he got this reputation a little bit.
Yeah, you know, and again, like, these guys, they're just doing their job. They're just training. Like, it's my bad for even going in there. Like, I should have told Master, hey, I can't do this, you know. But as a fighter, like a former fighter, it's like, just, that's something that is so hard to say. It's like, even though you know you're gonna get your ass kicked, and that's like going into a fight. It's like, you might know you're gonna lose. Like, I went into fights knowing that the other guy was supposed to win. Like, I'm the opponent, but it's like, fuck it, you know. It's like, I'll give it my best. And yeah, but after that though, it was when I went up to AKA afterwards, and luckily I talked with a guy up there, and he's like, hey man, he's like, these guys go fucking hard. He's like, you better tell them, you know, that you're a rider, not a fighter. And so, you know, I told Javier, the head coach, you know, I let him know what was going on. I was like, hey man, I was like, I'm not trying to get my ass kicked anymore. You know, but I still definitely got in decent amount of sparring at places. When I went to Syndicate MMA, you know, I hadn't trained like in 3 months. I took a little break when my baby was born, and my first practice, I go over there, and they probably have like 40 pros in their training. And you know, he was very cool. You know, I told the coaches again, I'm a rider, not a fighter. Everyone's going light. But then on the final day, right before I'm about to leave, the last round, I'm with Maurice Jackson, a huge. I think he's about 6. He must be about 6'8".
Wow.
And he's fighting for Bellator right now. But yeah, he dropped me with a right hand. I didn't go all the way out. I fell to a knee, but definitely had a concussion for like a 4-hour drive back to LA. So that wasn't too much fun. Um, it's like, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it, but now that's why I'm just gonna give up the sparring and only stick with jiu-jitsu. I was like, now I want to start, and that's why I started going to 10th Planet because um, I think a year and a half ago I went to Burbank's 10th Planet and I did a class with Eddie, and at the time I wasn't really, I didn't really know what 10th Planet was all about. I was just going there because one, I wanted to see what Eddie was about, and but I was, most of my focus was on MMA. I was like, well, they're just jiu-jitsu. Um, but then when I was rolling with the guys, I was like, holy shit! I was like, these guys feel so different than everywhere else that I've rolled around the country. Like, granted, I haven't gone in every class at the gyms. I haven't trained at every gym I've gone to. I usually try to though. But the 10th Planet guys, I was like, just the strength, the technicality, the different moves that they were getting me in. I was blown away. I was like, and if it was closer, I told him, I was like, man, I would be going here. I'd be taking my daughter here. I interviewed their female kids instructor, and because I was blown away by their kids program, and I was like, this is awesome. And so when I was trying to make the decision on whether or not to spar or whatever else, I was like, now I want to start studying jiu-jitsu as an art, because when I was fighting, I never, I would only learn enough to get by. It's like, I had a fight against Travis Bew in Mexico. We went the distance, but it was the first time that I had gotten picked up and slammed. I think it was like 2 or 3 times in that fight, and it wasn't until after that fight I was like, okay, well, we better work on defending that, right? So I had never, my knowledge was just enough to get by. I was trying to focus on strikes. I never felt like I could apply myself and really learn it. But now that I've been around it so much, I was like, now I'm really like, okay, I want to learn this system. I think 10th Planet is definitely the thing for me. Is like, I do not like gis. Whether it's me being lazy or whatever else. To me, it's like, I just would rather not. I was like, I don't want to mess with a gi at all. And the way you can watch the videos ahead of time to learn the system, and I mean, everything's there on the forum. I was like, I'm all about it, and being able to I'm able to go to headquarters twice a week now, and I'm trying to hit at least one 10th Planet. Whether it's, I just went to Buena Park last week. I was at Costa Mesa. Week before I went down to Vista, and there's just, all the guys are just such cool people. You get that everywhere. Like, just mixed martial arts in general, and I think makes better people. But I'm definitely down with all the 10th Planet. That lifestyle, those kinds of people. Like, it's definitely where I'm going to be training after this whole thing is done.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
$4.99 a month for mastering the system online.
That's what I've been doing.
That's awesome.
I was like, how can you beat that? And I show my daughter all the time because I'm starting to try to get my daughter into it. And so she'll watch the videos on my lap. I was like, look how cool this is. I was like, this is fun, right? I was like, doesn't this look awesome? And and so she's starting to get excited about it. And we're going to start filming a documentary. Because I've been, I've filmed all my interviews, but lots of times they're kind of the footage is shitty. Like, I didn't know what I was doing with the camera when I first started, or like the audio kind of sucked. And so now we're gonna do it like a nice documentary focusing on probably like 8 to 10 different fighters that I think represent people that I've learned a lot from, or who represent different types of fighters. But this coming week I'm going to start with Ashley Evans Smith, who recently fought Fallon Fox, the transgender fighter.
She beat Fallon Fox, right?
Yeah, she beat her. And we're also, I asked Ashley, I was like, how would you feel, doing a private session with my daughter? And so she's excited about it. Because I followed her career and I see her training kids and everything else. I was like, but I want to be able to talk about like why, I think this woman is a good role model. And because not only did she beat Fallon, but then just the way she handled herself afterwards, like, there were so many of her fans prior to the fight were talking so much crap about Fallon, and really bringing up the whole transgender thing and being kind of disrespectful, and Ashley called him on it. She's like, no, she's like, that's not what this is about. This is another human being. I just really respected the way that she handled herself and the whole situation afterwards. So I'm really looking forward to coming, getting back with her. I think it was like a year and a half ago that I interviewed her, so it's been a while. And that's the other fun thing, is being able to follow all these people. I think on tonight's card, I think there are 3 different guys I've interviewed that are fighting. Alp from St. Charles in Missouri, and Brad Tavares, and I think there's one other guy. But being able to see the guys that haven't been in the UFC yet, talking to them about how desperately, how much they want it, how that's their goal, and then watching them reach their goal, like, that's pretty, it definitely makes watching the fights much more fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I met Dennis Siever, the German fighter in the UFC. I met him years ago, maybe 4 years ago. He was already fighting in UFC, but he was still a lower level fighter. But now he's at featherweight. He dropped down a division, and he's doing well. He had some impressive performances. I mean, he only lost to Cub Swanson, who's like a top 5 at least in the division.
Right.
So yeah, he had a lot of success in the UFC, and impressive highlight reel, spitting back kicks. So yeah, it's beautiful to see if someone who you met when he wasn't like that successful, and then you see him go up the mountain,
Yeah. That. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
To come back to the jiu-jitsu real quick, for me personally, I've trained in a gi a lot, and ever since I like 1.5 years ago, the first no-gi Brazilian jiu-jitsu class I took, I just like it better. I like the speed better. And also, I really like that you're doing this with Eddie, because I think Eddie Bravo is the last great innovator in martial arts. He's the last one that really took a system and made it his own, and started to bring his own note into it.
Yeah, and that's what's been really awesome. Like, I go to class Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon, and Eddie teaches the class, and when he's teaching like those classes, like yesterday, he talked for a long time because he was filming the new passes and talking about the warm-ups and everything. But you get to see, you get to listen to him and how he's gone about it, and how he tries out the new moves, and how open-minded he is. And I was like, that's pretty awesome. That's very cool. I think it was I think the second day that I had shown up there, where I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to start trying to train because it was kind of a long drive. Jean-Jacques Machado came in, and Chrome Gracie, and and then Eddie gave a long talk about them also. And it's like every class you're getting something very cool, and it's like that's just such an opportunity, is like, to be able to train with.
Oh, definitely, sounds beautiful. It's such an opportunity to be there directly with the master of 10th Planet. He's one of the few guys who really gave a name to every little step in his system, like go to the truck, crackhead control, stuff like that. Some people might think, it's some crazy names, but that way it's easier for beginners to remember all the little steps. So he's very big, like Lucas said, one of the few guys who really took a system and developed it even further.
Right. In seeing how all of the schools are as well, and how much, what he gives them, and how he just brings in so much knowledge. Like, whenever someone new comes in, if they have something that works, it's like, okay, it's like, how do we make this work, and how do we even make it better? And there's no stopping, saying, okay, I know this is the way it is, and that's all we're gonna go with. He's like, no, it's like, we're gonna just keep getting better and better, and we're gonna make this thing as awesome as possible. So yeah, man, I'm excited about it. I'm starting to do privates with one of his black belts, because I wanna actually start competing this year, as long as it's an old man division and no gi. I was like, I'm cool with that. It's like, I may not win, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, there's a big difference in traditional jiu-jitsu, like Cron Gracie does. He has a few moves, but he mastered those moves to a level where no one can stop him. If he gets your back and goes for a rear naked choke, it's over. But Eddie is kind of like, yeah, we're always looking for new stuff to improve the system, like to also the surprise factor, I think, in his system, that if you, like you said, you went there first time, you didn't expect someone to just control you with his legs and flexibility like that, I bet. Like that's a big factor in the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it totally blew me away, and so I'm trying to work on my flexibility a little bit at home. Starting to do the yoga, and but yeah, it's a very cool system. And it's a little overwhelming at first, but being able to get on the forum, and I printed out the technique, the chart, the flow chart that they have, and starting to go over those things. It makes it doable. Is not overwhelming that way. And one thing, I'll send you guys the link tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to release my my animated pilot for Unlocking the Cage. We made a little, I think it's about 2.5 minutes long. Talks a little bit about the project, and we have an interview with Joe Lozon. And we're going to pitch it to a bunch of TV shows. We're hoping to make it into like a 30-minute series. Maybe similar to like a Family Guy, but a little bit, not as crude. And I was talking with Eddie. I said, "Hey man," I was like, "I would love to have you on as a recurring character if we sell this thing." And he's all for it. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed on that. But I'll send you guys that video tomorrow.
That's awesome, and we'll add this to the description. Definitely sounds beautiful. And now to get a little bit into your other life, so to say. You already have a book out, or a couple books. Your latest one is called 25 Perfect Days, right?
Correct. Well, actually, I just had another one released 2 days ago. The print book came in 2 days ago. It's called Try Not to Die. This one is called Try Not to Die at Grandma's House. It's I don't know if you guys ever read Choose Your Own Adventures as a young kid. But in that series, every couple pages, the reader gets to choose what it's going to do. It's like, oh, do you go for the shotgun, or do you go for the handgun? What happens?
I remember that.
Yeah. So we just started our own. I'm going to do a bunch of these books, probably like 4 or 5 a year. And this is the first one where there's one correct way through the whole book, and the rest of the other ways end in death. And it's got some cool illustrations and stuff. But yeah, 25 Perfect Days is we released it in 2013, and I was very excited to see that an indie reader named it as one of the best indie books of 2013, and I'm about to release another 5 stories that go along that are set in that same world. And what I'm really excited about with this one is I'm getting a lot of cool response from readers saying that it makes them start paying attention to what's going on in our country and the world in general. Because I wrote it as a warning. It's a dystopian tale about what could happen if we don't make some changes. So that's probably the biggest compliment is when a reader says it. In one review, is the lady wrote back that it makes her want to fight back. I was like, that's pretty cool for me as an author to hear.
Definitely, that sounds like a very interesting book. I like those dystopian, post-apocalyptic, maybe even those kind of stories, because they're thought-provoking, and you kind of feel like this could happen if we don't change something, We gotta watch out.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I was hoping to get across. I mean, some of the stories are a little extreme, and it's like some of the stories won't ever take place, but lots of the stories that I write are really, I might be taking examples from other countries where the things are really going on, and just fictionalizing them a little bit. And in the 5 More Perfect Days, which I'm about to release, one of the stories is about the NSA and whistleblowers. Another one of the stories is about drone strikes. Another one is about homosexuality being stamped out. So I try to make, I take a look at current events and just exaggerate them a little bit and try to bring some focus on it, so people can be like, they if they read it, they might be feeling pity for this person that the main character, and then by the end of the story, they're like, wow, I used to feel the opposite way about this kind of lifestyle or this kind of event, or like maybe I never gave a shit about drone strikes before, but now I'm reading about what it did to this family, you know. So maybe it makes it a little bit more real. Maybe it brings some, you know, shines a spotlight on it. I was like, if that happens, I was like, that's very cool. Um, and in my first novel, Brightside, um, Brightside is about telepaths that are rounded up by the government and stuck in a little town. You know, so it was a nice chance for me to write about you know, our thoughts and just how much, you know, we worry so much about what other people think all the time, and we think, you know, a lot of times, depending on your attitude, you might think that people are looking at you a certain way or real negative or whatever else. So that gave me a chance to kind of write on that, but then also to, you know, make a statement about, you know, the government and, you know, who are they afraid of? You know, if people were able to read each other's thoughts, that's not something the government would want, because, you know, I won't go too much into it, but that's kind of why I wrote that book.
Yeah, I love that because, especially here in Germany, if someone is a former or is an active MMA fighter, a lot of people will look at this guy like, oh man, this guy can't be that smart. But you're proving everyone wrong. You got books out, you're an author, writing very deep stories, and you know that's very awesome that you kind of go into this different direction, because especially here in Germany, MMA is still very small, like not a big market. It's banned on TV,
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, it's really a problem here in Germany.
And not only on TV, like down here in the South, getting a promotion together and actually doing fights is really hard because the government is so against it, and I don't understand why really. It's a great sport, and they just block it out completely, and the growth that keeps the growth back really, and I don't know why. It's sad.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that at all. That's terrible. You know, and that'd be interesting to find out why that is. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, that's what I hope to show. You know, I hope to change some minds about who fighters are. Like, I understand people may not like the violence, they may not like the way MMA appears. Maybe it's not for them, but I do want to show that the fighters are not animals. They're not these barbarians. They're not, you know, it's nothing like most people think they are. You know, I think the average mom or housewife or whatever probably has the wrong idea of what these men and women are all about. You know, they're some of the best people I've ever met, and I've realized that's not, it's not just because they're fighters. You know, it's because they've been exposed to martial arts, and you know, martial arts changes people. The longer someone's in it, the better person I think they're going to be. You know, I've changed so much over the last year and a half because I've been surrounded by these people. So I'm hearing all these stories from the fighters. I'm meeting all these different individuals at the gyms. Um, and another really cool thing about I'm writing an article right now because I just realized, I was like, I'm probably the most submitted man in America. You know, and it started out it kind of started out as a joke. I was like I should apply for, you know, the Guinness World Records, because I seriously doubt there's anyone who's been tapped by more people this year than me. Because you figure, you know, an average white belt or blue belt that's not that good might get, he probably only goes to one gym, maybe two gyms, and so he gets tapped by, let's say, 40 people throughout the year. It's like at headquarters, I'm getting tapped by everybody, and it's like a revolving door there. And then, you know, all these gyms I go to, I'm training with the fighters, and even when I go to regular classes, I'm still, you know, I'm getting tapped by the purple belts, I'm getting tapped by the browns, lots of the blues. You know, I'm starting to get a little bit better. So I was like, I don't know how many guys I've been tapped to this year, but I think it would be hard to find someone that's had more. But what I like about that though, and why I'm writing the article, is just how humbling that is. You know, and that's one reason why martial arts is great. Is like, you realize, you know, you're not the toughest guy. You have so much more to learn. And then also seeing how gracious people are, you know, when you know, when you're training with them, and you do submit, and how they're trying to teach you, and how they're sharing their knowledge. You know, and so that's been another great experience for me. You know, so many people like to walk around and they think they're the tough guy and whatever else. And it'd be easy for me to kind of have that in my head, and and people look at me and they, even with the tattoos and whatever else, and I used to be a power lifter, and so like they might think that already, but I was like, no, it's like that's not the case, man. It's like, so being able to go out there and be like, yeah, I was like, I've been tapped out by probably more people than anyone else this year. It's like, but I'm not gonna be ashamed of it. It's like I'm trying, and because I'm trying, I'm getting better. And within a year of training with Eddie, I'm gonna be a completely different person. So when I go back to these gyms, hopefully I'll only get tapped about maybe half the times.
Yeah, and especially with MMA, it's a constant reality check. You can fool yourself and be in an MMA gym, and think you're the toughest. That doesn't fly.
Yeah, that is completely true.
Like, can you get into it a little bit when you sparred with Cain Velasquez? That sounds interesting.
Thank God I didn't spar with him. Kane was getting ready for, I forget what fight it was. So he was in full fight mode. I think his camp had already started. But I did a wrestling. It was either a wrestling class or I think it might have been a jiu-jitsu class. And so I rolled with him for a bit. So I rolled with him for a bit, but he was super cool. Didn't mind that I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Because an 8-year break of my last fight was in I think 2004, and then I took 8 years off of doing nothing, and so getting back in there at the very start was a little sad. But he was awesome, just a really nice guy. And then the next day I did some was a sparring day, and Daniel Cormier partnered up with me for 2 rounds. But again, like I told him what the situation was, and he was just so super cool. Just played with me for 2 rounds. Didn't throw anything hard. And that's a guy that I would love to talk with. So I really want to get back up there. It's just hard trying to schedule things. I do everything on my own. I'm completely independent. My wife and I have just financed this whole thing. So trying to set up the fighters, like you never know it's hard to figure out, like, okay, this guy's in camp, so I don't want to bother him. So trying to set up all those meetings and interviews, like that's kind of hard. So lots of times I'll just play it by ear. I'll just go to a gym, and whoever crosses my path is like, that's who I was meant to talk to. Definitely going with the flow a lot more on this thing.
Something else I wanted to ask, because you said you're like weighing 250 now or something like that, and I saw that you fought at light heavyweight 205. So what's your opinion on weight cutting? Because that's a huge issue nowadays in MMA.
That was probably the worst mistake I ever made in my life. Because we had been, I've been fighting heavyweight. I was normally, my walking weight was 245, and at one point I was even 275.
Wow.
So I've always been a bigger dude, but I think I was 245, and we realized we're like, well, this isn't working. So why don't we cut weight to the AFC fight in Florida, and go down to light heavyweight? And I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. And that was it was brutal, because I had 1 month to lose 40 pounds. And I still remember the last 11 pounds was the day before. So I'm on the airplane. I remember all I had was salsa and a couple egg whites and celery, and that's all I could eat. And then we weigh in the night before the fight. I still don't, I still had to lose, I forget how many pounds. And so I had to put on the heavy, the trash bags. I get on the treadmill. I'm running all night. I weigh in naked, and I barely make weight. It's really late at night. Everything's closed except for this one little place. And I think I ended up having like Hawaiian punch and like just some really, really terrible food. And so I'd never been that sick before in my life, because I'd never cut weight before. And I remember the next day it's time for, it's fight night. And I remember I couldn't even it felt like I couldn't raise my arms, and my brain just wasn't there at all. And so I went into that fight, and I took a shot a couple minutes into the fight. And that's when the next thing I know, I take the shot. Next thing I know, I'm in the locker room, mid-sentence. They're getting ready to take me to the hospital. and I fought a couple more minutes after that, after I took that punch. But as far as I know, like there was 15 minutes of time that I just wasn't even there. It was a pretty severe concussion.
That's what a lot of fighters say, that when they take a big shot, even in the first round, they go totally on autopilot. Like they don't even remember what they did, and after the fight, they can't remember what happened. After, especially, I remember Junior Dos Santos after the first Cain Velasquez fight. He was like, after the first big shot, I think in the first round, he said he couldn't remember anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like this just can't be good for your brain, like taking this amount of punishment.
Yeah, and that's one thing I do worry about. I worry about lots of these fighters. I think a lot of guys are, I don't know, I think maybe they are just better designed or more capable, or I don't know if it's a stronger neck or what, but I think a lot of these guys are able to take the damage, and hopefully it won't have any lasting permanent damage on their brain. Because I've talked with guys that have had over 60 fights. I just recently spoke with Aaron Riley, who recently retired from the UFC.
He's a veteran.
Yeah, but talking with him, he's an intelligent guy. Because I kind of look for that too. I look to see if maybe the guy slurs his speech, or if maybe he's not 100% there. But I haven't really seen that yet. So I think maybe some guys are better able to handle it. I don't think it's nearly the level of abuse you're going to take in boxing. But anytime you're taking punches to the head, like that's why I finally decided. I should not be doing this, because when I was boxing, my speech was messed up. I was slurring my words a lot. I was definitely feeling the effects, and I did not like that. So, knowing that and knowing how many concussions I had between playing college football, high school football, boxing, and MMA, I was like, there's a good chance that maybe I'll have dementia a little bit earlier than I would have if I hadn't done that shit. So maybe that's why, even though I would love to keep sparring, it's hard to tell the guys, oh no, I'm not going to do it, because I feel like a big pussy. I know it's a smart thing. It's like I should not be getting hit in the head anymore. Because who knows when it's going to be that one punch that you're just not right afterwards. So hopefully these fighters just pay attention to it. Hopefully they have loved ones that will keep an eye on them. Hopefully coaches will keep an eye. I think it's really great that we do have the commissions are pretty good about saying there's no contact for however many months after a concussion. But so many concussions happen during training and when people aren't aware. But all I can tell fighters is just be careful. It's the only brain you got. So, I think a lot of fighters just, whether it's feeling immortal, or I'm not sure exactly what it is, but or not caring. But you really can't care too much when you're in the sport, when it's not only your profession but your love. Like I know so many guys that just love fighting, and they couldn't be without it. So it's definitely something that needs to be looked at, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in 10 years, and especially with kids. I worry about kids starting at too young. MMA is great for kids. I've written about that. I'm 100% for it, as long as they're not taking the strikes, as long as it's controlled. Young kids don't need to be getting their heads bashed in at all.
I totally understand that, and I've trained boxing for 2 years almost, and the first 6 months was hell. I've never been knocked out really, but I've been knocked to my knees. Like I had my legs would give out, and I would I would go down to my knees, and then you go home and you try to lay down, and your eyes hurt and your ears ring and your head is throbbing. That can't be healthy. And then you just shake it off, and 2 weeks after that you're right back in there, and that can't be healthy.
Yeah. It's like we know it's not good for us, but it's like, oh well, I'm a man, I'll get back in there, and it's fun. So it's just when we're young, we just think it's no big deal. Nothing's gonna happen to me. Now that I'm in my 40s, it's like, okay, I got kids. I need to start thinking about that. I don't want to be all screwed up, when they're older. So, yeah, anyone that's in combat sports is like, just be careful, enjoy it, have fun, be smart about training, and good luck.
And that's where jiu-jitsu comes in, because when you go to a
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu class, you don't have to worry about getting knocked out, or even, I mean, you could get choked out if you're not careful and not tapping, but normally in jiu-jitsu there's no bullies who like totally abuse you and want to fuck you up and break your arm or choke you the fuck out. It's normally not happening in jiu-jitsu. There's in this community, you can go there the first day no worrying about getting beat up. That's good. It's a good thing about jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, no, that's why I love it. I was recently at the Yamasaki Academy in Virginia, Mario Yamasaki and his brother's academy. And I was able to see really that's where I got to really see, okay, just how awesome that whole community is, and how much respect there is, and how much people help each other. One of the guys had been battling cancer. Had stage 4 cancer. Like, he had a 30% chance of living. They said he would never have another kid. Incredible medical bills. And this academy just got together. Their black belts started doing seminars, and before you know it, they raised $40,000 for him. And then he's cancer free now, and he just had, like, a couple weeks before I interviewed him, he had just had a little baby girl. And I was like, man, that was awesome. Being able to talk with him about that, and just how much jiu-jitsu saved his life, because not only was it this community that saved his life, and that raised all this money for him and gave him all this moral support, but like he says, it was jiu-jitsu, it was that mindset that made him, of fighting, of training. Like, he wasn't gonna let the cancer beat him. And so he owes his, he says he's alive today because of jiu-jitsu.
That's beautiful. And actually, just on our latest episode, we had a guy on, Brian Freeman. He had a T4 spinal cord injury and is in a wheelchair now. He can walk, but he started jiu-jitsu, and he's doing jiu-jitsu in North Carolina. And he told us that he started sitting in a wheelchair, and his coach just focused on hand fighting, just fighting people off. And now he's actually rolling. He's doing arm triangles, and so jiu-jitsu is for everyone. If you want to do it, you can do it. Nothing's holding you back. So it was really a great story that he told us. Brian Freeman from North Carolina, big shout out to him.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw, because I just looked at your guys' the YouTube, and I saw that. I was like, wheelchair jiu-jitsu, and I didn't have a chance to listen to it yet, so I'll definitely check that out.
Really inspirational guy. Really amazing what he does.
Definitely. Cool. That's a beautiful story. So we're going almost an hour now. Let's get back to our friend Yak Nasty, because Mark, maybe you've heard about the whole Death Squad community.
Yeah, I did, and Waterboxer told me about that. And I made a donation, and I was going to call up right now and actually donate a couple books. Maybe the next couple of people that make a donation can I'll send them a signed copy of the book or whatever, because I want to try to help out some more.
Awesome, man.
It's fucking rad, man.
Yeah.
So 24-hour podcast, like, is going on for a couple other more hours, right?
Yeah, I think it goes 2 more hours. I think they're going to wrap it up at 4 o'clock. So as soon as I get off here, I was going to call them up real quick and tell them, I was going to donate, maybe 5 books, and hopefully people want them and donate some money.
Beautiful.
That's right, man. Thank you very much. So we don't want to hold you up any longer. We'll post the link in the description for the GoFundMe site. $5, $10, anything you can give it to them. They're really in need.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think you guys are awesome for doing that. It's just very cool to see that whole community coming together for them.
Definitely, that's a beautiful thing. Being there for each other, help where help is needed. It's important. So, Mark, thank you very much for coming on, man. Really an honor.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to Waterboxer.
I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Definitely, we can do this again anytime.
Okay, awesome, guys. You have a good night.
Thank you, man. So
thank you.
Now, see you next time on Don't Fake
Fake
the Funk.
the Funk.
Tether.